Hello and welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop solution for an English medium UPSC Civil Services aspirant. I welcome you all to the first session of the final lap, and the final lap has been decided specifically for your revision, and in a very short and a brief session itself, we'll cover all critical aspects of that subject. Today the first subject is history, and we'll be discussing ancient and medieval India through timelines and maps, and I will try to give you basic understanding through the timeline also and give you basic pointers which you can revise just before the examination. From today till 14th of June, tomorrow we'll talk about modern India, and then we'll transition to other subjects such as economics, polity and other important aspects such as geography and environment ecology. So with this, let's start our session. A very important announcement for you that the Manzil price which was previously there is finally back based on popular demand. 24,999 is back, and if you have ever thought of becoming part of Unacademy, this is the right time. On 8th June, the new batch is starting, and 9th June this price will end. So do make sure that if you're thinking about joining us, you should. With this, let's start our discussion, and we will start with ancient India. When we talk about ancient India, the basic period which we are covering is 2 million BCE to close to 750 to 600 BCE based on, or rather CE based on our idea, which is 600 if you want to go till Gupta Vakatakas and 750 if we add early medieval, but I have a separate section for early medieval itself, so you don't have to worry with regards to that. So, two things will happen. First, I will give you the time period. And once I've given you the time period, I will also give you the main pointers of that period. Over and above that, I will use maps to also make you imagine how India is changing during this period. So, the first is the prehistoric period, and here we can basically start with 2 million BCE to 10,000 BCE, which is before Common Era. Then we can put in 10,000 to 4,000 BCE, and then 4,000 to 2,600 BCE. The 2 million to 10,000 BCE period is called Paleolithic, which is further divided into the upper, middle and lower Paleolithic period. You have here the Mesolithic period, and thereafter the Neolithic period, the most important of all three. Together they are called prehistory because there are no written sources, only archaeological sources are there, that is why it is called prehistory. Now in this, I will tell you what is the most important feature. Here there are three very important features. First, fire as a technology was known at this point of time. We believe the wheel had also been developed to some level. Thereafter, we have bulky stone tools, that is why the name Paleolithic, old stone age itself. And thereafter, the last, which is equally important, hunting gathering, and it is a simple society. More than that, this is also the ice ages, and therefore the idea is very simple. Because of ice ages, fire was very important, bulky stone tools, as the animals are very big also. This is called the Pleistocene epoch in that sense. In 10,000 BC, we believe that we go from Pleistocene to Holocene, and that is a period of the earth's warming, and we get the Mesolithic period with animals becoming smaller and faster. The first is the era of microliths, as you need smaller tools which can be tied to the wood and thrown as a spear, or you need a better axe itself, from hand axes to axe which could be thrown. The second is equally important, which is rituals develop during this period, and last but not the least and the most important, which is called domestication of animals. So we believe that basically the concept of animal husbandry developed during the Mesolithic period. From Mesolithic we move towards Neolithic, the new stone age. Neolithic, which is 4,000 to 2,600, varies from region to region. In India, Mehraj being the first and the most important site, you have the most important technology, which is domestication of plants, which we today call as agriculture. And agriculture is that poison, if you want to call it, or that technology which has a chain reaction wherein it will lead to complex society, because agriculture leads to sedentary life. From sedentary life you get surplus production. From surplus production you will get the concept of complex society. With complex society you will get what is called as early polity, the need for a political formation so that the surplus could be managed. With domestication of plants you also get pottery for the first time, because you need to store the plants itself. And last but not the least is there is a need for sedentary life, so the houses become more permanent and the rituals become more elaborate. Neolithic is that period which basically is considered as the starting point of civilizational understanding. That is why it is also called the Neolithic Revolution. There are certain important sites which you should know: Mehraj, Kodiva, Burzahom. Mehraj as the oldest site, Kodiva for rice, Burzahom for what we call as double pit burial and pit burial itself along with pit dwellings, and generally this period is considered the starting point of all forms of change in the world and specifically also in India. Thereafter we move to a period which is marked by the Chalcolithic phase. In Chalcolithic there are two phases, which is non-Harappan Chalcolithic and Harappan Chalcolithic, which is also a Bronze Age. So, do remember that Indus Valley civilization comes within Chalcolithic itself. Chalcolithic, non-Harappan, Juare culture, Malwa culture, that is there, but we will concentrate on the Indus Valley civilization, which is the Bronze Age itself. And here you have three basic dates for early, middle or mature and late. So, the date which is given is 3200 and all these dates are from Upinder Singh. So, do not have to worry, you will find variation in dates in a lot of different books, but I have used the most authentic book for this area, which is Upinder Singh. So, 3200 to 2600 BCE, then 2600 to 1700 BCE, and from 1700 BCE to 1500 BCE. These timelines will change because there is a lot of research happening nowadays with regards to the Harappan civilization and its connection to the Vedic period. Let us see what is the outcome of that. This is called early Harappan period or early IVC. This is called mature Harappan period, the most important phase in that regard. And last but not the least, we have the decline phase in which there is proper decline. Early, for example, Amri, Kotdizi, quite important. Mohenjo-daro or Harappa were also developing at this point of time. But in mature, we find multiple important characteristics. One you know is town planning. As we know, town planning with regards to the citadel, the lower town concept or the upper town, lower town concept, drainage, water resources, toilets, houses, double story, the gates opening into side streets, what we call as grid pattern for all. Banavli is the example for radial, the only example, the exception, and we have the brick size standardization 1:2:4. This is all standard known stuff about town planning. The most important, which is accompanied by urbanization, which is quite interesting that ways. Thereafter, in mature, we also have what is called as polity. This polity is a mature polity because there is a lot of standardization and uniformity, but we do not know what is the exact nature of the polity because there is a lot of research which has to be done, and there is one theory which says either it is a priestly polity or it could be merchant based. Then we have the script which has still not been deciphered, which is called Bostrofenden, which is it goes from left to right, left to right, left to right. That is what called Bostrofenden, and the biggest has been found in Dholavira, the 26 character, very big, what we call a signboard itself. And we have internal and external trade. This is the first time that internal and external trade develops. External trade with Mesopotamia, with Dilmun, with Oman, with the West Asian sector itself, and therefore it is quite important. Decline phase is when the Harappan civilization will start to decline. A very important point here is that the decline phase, there are multiple theories again. We have Srinathnagar saying that it is the connections with Mesopotamia gone. We have the hydrological theory, which is flooding. We have the drought theory, which is that with the meandering of the Indus river itself and the Saraswati river automatically desiccating or basically drying out, there is a lot of drought and flooding in different sectors. And then we have the most controversial and had a colonistic understanding, which is the Aryan invasion theory. Aryan migration for sure happened, that too is now questioned, but Aryan migration did happen. However, Aryan invasion is the idea which the British developed to argue that this land has always been invaded by people. So, we generally call it Aryan migration. Just to give you a basic understanding of where the geographies are, I will also mark this on the basic north-south axis. So, we believe the northernmost site is Manda for the Indus Valley civilization. Then we have Sutka Gendor in the west, and we have Alamgirpur in the east, and last but not the least Daimabad in the south. Now, there are again multiple texts which talk about different areas, but this is the most known and accepted, which is the idea that Manda, Sutka Gendor, Alamgirpur and Daimabad are the biggest and the what we call as known north, south, east, west ones. Now, there is one more interesting feature about the Indus Valley civilization, that mostly it will go till maximum Haryana, and its basic area was not into the Gangetic plain. One of the reasons for that, from Shotugai being the raw material site, not the northernmost, a raw material site in Afghanistan which gives lapis lazuli, the idea was very, very simple, that because they did not have access to iron, they are a bronze age civilization. Being a bronze age civilization, they do not have the iron to clear down the forests of this sector, and that is why nothing is found in this area. A very important point you should know, which is the eastward expansion of the civilization will only happen in the next phase. We are right now in the semi and the arid zones of what we call as today India, Pakistan and Afghanistan, but was called the Indian subcontinent at this point of time. And we had multiple trade routes going even via the water. We have Lothal known port in that regard. That way, it is an important phase in that sense. So, I hope Indus Valley civilization is very sorted for you. It should not be a problem. Generally, a very important area out of which questions have come. A very known question, was there horse in the Indus Valley civilization? Yes, we have that for sure. We have multiple sites about that, but the basic point is horse is there. And you do not have to get confused. Even nowadays, Lothal, Harappa have started to give evidences of horse bones in that regard. Right. Now, with this we move to a period where there will be a bifurcation. Basically, after 1500, we generally believe that there are non-Harappan Chalcolithic cultures also, but we do not put them on the map or in the timeline. But 1500 to 500 is a period where there will be two divisions, one for North India and the other one for South India, wherein in North India what we will see is that we will have 1500 to 1000 BCE and 1000 to 500 BCE. And this whole period in South India is called the megalithic period. They are called megalithic period because of the big burial stones which they use, dolomite, we have schist burial. The idea is this period is, they know iron, it is the iron age of South India. Along with that, they are agro-pastoral, and they also in some ways have skipped the concept of Bronze Age. They directly go from Neolithic to sometimes iron itself, and it is a semi-urban civilization, but there has been a lot of research which again happened in this area, and urbanization is now being associated with the megalithic period. I am staying away from the new developments because that has not been documented into the NCERT or into standard text. That is why we will talk about the major trends according to standard static understanding. Now, this period is called early Vedic phase, and this one is called later Vedic. Now, Vedic period was marked by what is called as the Aryan migration. With the coming of the Aryans, this is the period where the historical phase of history also starts, which is we had prehistory, proto-history, which is the Indus Valley civilization, where you have textual reference but we do not know what it says, and then you have Aryan migration. With Aryan migration, we get Sanskrit and the Brahmi script. Brahmi script. There is a lot of controversy over Sanskrit, Tamil being the oldest, but according to standard sources, Sanskrit is the one in which we got the Vedas, and that is considered representative. I am not saying it is the first one, it is representative of this period. Now, early Vedic phase has 3 to 4 very important characteristics, you should know this. First, it is known for tribal polity, which is that they have kept their pastoralist, their economy is pastoralism and pastoralist past, because the Aryans themselves were what we call as pastoralists, and under pastoralism, tribal polity, cattle was very, very important. We even know wars for cattle itself. And over and above that, because it is tribal polity, the Rajan is the protector of the people and the cattle. He is non-hereditary, he is not monarchical in that regard. And further, the society is simple. Society is simple in the sense it is not as stratified as it would be in the later Vedic period. There is division of the society on the basis of occupation rather than the basis of what we call as division on purity. So, it is occupationally there. Some argument would be there that it is egalitarian, but egalitarianism could not be there, cannot be ascertained properly, but it is surely divided on occupation itself. Pastoralist, no taxation, and there is a regression from the Indus Valley civilization as there is no trade itself, neither internal nor external. In that regard, no trade. No currency existed till this point of time. Whatever we discussed previously, currency will only exist after the Mahajanapada phase, punch-marked coins. So, this is the phase in which we also have a naturalistic form of religion, and that naturalistic form of religion is basically based on the reading of the Vedas, Varun, Agni, and now gods are emerging, but that has not been totally fully crystallized in that regard. And thereafter, in 1000 to 500 BCE, we get the later Vedic phase, which is marked by monarchical control, which is the ideas of proper state formation itself, and within monarchical control we also know that taxation will emerge, hereditary kingship will emerge. Now the king is the protector of territory, land will become important. As I told you, agriculture had now become staple. When there will be agriculture, there will always be a new complexity which will come in. Taxation has come in with regards to now. Previously it may have been voluntary, there was a little bit of what we call as a gift form of giving to the Rajan itself. We also had here the Sabha, Samiti and Vidhata, and Sabha was the elders committee itself, Samiti was everyone else, and here women were allowed in both, and Vidhata is when the Samiti meets for ritualistic purposes or religious purposes. Thereafter, here with agriculture, the Sabha becomes exclusive to the monarch itself. Samiti starts to fade away, Vidhata totally fades away, which is what is more important is wealth is based on land and taxation becomes proper. Now the Bhaga is properly land, revenue and taxation. What is even more important is Vedic Brahmanism based on the later Vedic text, Vedic Brahmanism. I am not calling this Hinduism. Hinduism is something which is Vedic Brahmanism plus Bhakti equals to what we call as Hinduism, and you need Bhagavatism of the Gupta period also. Vedic Brahmanism at this point of time is what will produce also the fourfold Varna structure, and the Varna system will also emerge at this point of time. The Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra system, social exclusion is going to become very, very common. Women will start to lose their access which they had in the early Vedic period with regards to education and land, and women and the Shudra community will be fully ostracized and excluded from the system. This is a very standard thing which you should know. All social evils in India are associated with the later Vedic period itself based on later Vedic texts and the ideas of Vedic Brahmanism in that regard, which will also become the context for the rise of Buddhism and Jainism. Now that we have established later Vedic territorial kingship comes in, but also what is common to both is iron knowledge was known here, but iron was used, and with the use of iron what happens is the Aryan civilization start to enter into the Gangatic plain, and with 22 Janapadas first rising, what will happen is that in the 6th century BCE, these 22 Janpads will basically interact with each other and in turn give rise to the 16 Mahajanapadas. And you do not have to learn each and every name, but what is important for us is the most important in this story, which is between this phase of 500 BCE to 682 BCE to 327 BCE to 324 BCE. South we will now see still till this point megalithic, that will remain the same, But you now will see by the rise of 300 BCE to 200 BCE, we will see the Sangam age starting. Sangam age is basically the age of the Chola Chera Pandyas. We don't know too much about them vis-a-vis their political setup itself. We'll look at their geographical location. But the Sangam age is associated with 3rd century BCE to 3rd century CE. Megalithic remains the same. There is a need for this gap to be filled up. We don't know too much about it. 500 BC is basically 6th century BC. This is the age of the 16 Mahajanapadas, out of which the most important Mahajanapad, as you know, would be Magadha. Magadha is the one which will emerge most victorious out of the 16 Mahajanapadas. It is also the period of the rise of Buddhism, Jainism and Ajivikism. And under it, Ajivikism was the first to rise, Makhali Gosala, and thereafter we have Siddhartha and Vardhaman Mahavira. Buddhism you should further remember, I am telling it to you here itself. You should know the Atriya Sachais, which is the four truths. Thereafter the Ashtang Marg, the eightfold path itself. Basic terminology is good enough. And the 4 Buddhist councils. The 4th Buddhist council, I will give you a trick. Remember, don't have to learn the years as of right now, not the time to learn years. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. 1st and 3rd, there will be books written. You have the Vinay and the Sutta Pitak here. 3rd is Abhidhamma, odd numbers. Even numbers you will have splits, which is Theravada or Theravadin and Mahasangika, and then the Mahasangika then further splitting up into Mahayanic, Hinayanic, and Mahayanic will give birth to Vajrayanic. Mahayanic argued that Buddha was God, Hinayanic argued that Buddha was a teacher, and therefore idol worship very common in Mahayanic and Buddhi concept of Bodhisattvas. Thereafter 4th is important because after this point Buddhism will totally split up into 2, then into 3. Vajrayanic, the concept of Tantra Mantra, Tara will become important. Jainism, remember two councils are there, and here the concept of self-purification, austerity, the 3 Ratanas here, and the basic ideas, Ahimsa being very, very important. Ajivikism, leave it to Niyati and fate, that is what is important. Now, by 682, we see the rise of Magadha properly. The rise of Magadha, there were multiple factors which allowed Magadha to become important. Why? Because firstly it was its location. Based on the location, it had 3 different rivers on 3 sides itself, the Champa, the Son and the Ganga, and therefore it was very clear that nobody could come from the 3 sides. Then after that it is on a plateau, therefore they had a higher ground itself. Further, it had access to the iron ores of the Chota Nagpur plateau. It had the highest volume of iron weapons and iron ores itself, and therefore nobody could defeat Magadha generally, more cosmopolitan also, and based on a trade route, start at Rajgir and will go to Patliputra. Here you need to know within Magadha, which is this period, there are 3 important dynasties. You have the Haryanka, the Shishunga and the Nanda. And in Haryanka you have 3 very important rulers. We have Bimbisara, we have Ajatshatru, and we have Udayan. And Udayan is the one who will shift the capital away from Rajgir to Patliputra, modern day Patna. Bimbisara and Ajatshatru are the ones who are basically going to consolidate, and Ajatshatru is equally important because he is contemporary to Buddhist, which is Siddhartha and Mahavira. So he was a very important disciple of Buddha himself. So Bimbisara, Ajatshatru and Udayan. These are 3 very important names you should know with regards to Magadha. Magadha, last name which you should know is a name called Dhanananda. And Dhanananda will come into the picture when we will talk about this phase, which is the period of Alexander's invasion. Alexander's invasion is when Alexander, the son of Philip, who was basically under the Achaemenid Empire, is going to start to fight the Achaemenid Empire itself. To give you a basic idea here, we have the Magadha sector starting from here, and Magadha had now become much bigger by fighting different Mahajanapads. It had consolidated itself under Dhanananda. From a very small sector like this, it had expanded to become very big. Now from this sector Alexander will come. He will keep on expanding from the what we call as Macedonian sector, which is modern Greece, and move towards the erstwhile Achaemenid Empire and reach the Indus river. When he will reach the Indus river, now the major concept will start, which is he will now have to cross the Indus River, and he will see one major, what we call as, problem in that story. And one is Ambhi, who is the ruler of Takshila. He will give up and he will become a part of Alexander itself. Indus River has always been like a border for India itself. So Ambhi will give up, then will come Porus. Porus will give very staunch resistance, 3 months of proper fighting, then he will lose to Alexander. A lot of people talk about winning. No, he loses to Alexander, but Alexander is very impressed by how Porus fought. So he gives the empire back to Porus itself. We don't know the exact location of Porus, but it is near the Jhelum river itself. And thereafter, now he will be poised to cross the Byas river and enter India specifically, now crossing and fighting Dhanananda. Now Dhanananda, at this point of time, it is believed to have had a very big army, and Alexander's army had been fighting, if you can see, had been fighting continuously for close to 3 to 4 years. So they gave up, they said we don't want to fight. There was a mutiny in his army. They said we don't want to fight, we are homesick, we want to go back. And Alexander, fortunately for the Indian subcontinent, will go back, and the Dhanananda and Magadha dynasty will not be touched. But the challenge to the Magadha dynasty is not going to come from Alexander, but from within, and therein lies that in 324, Dhanananda will be killed by one of his officers, his name Chandragupta Maurya, and with the help of Kautilya or Vishnu Gupta or whatever you want to call him, Chanakya was very, very important. Kautilya was very, very important in creating the context in which Chandragupta Maurya is going to now start the next phase of our history, which is the period between 324 to 184 BC. In South India, we will have the Sangam age that will remain, and between 324 to 184 BCE, we will have the mighty Mauryas. The beauty of the Mauryan Empire was that Mauryas had a certain expanse which never had been seen previously by any other ruler at this point of time, which is under Chandragupta Maurya it will be created. Then will come Bindusara, not Bimbisara, Bindusara, the father of Ashoka, and then Ashoka will come to rule. When Ashoka will come to rule, his major fight here was here with regards to the Kalinga war itself, after which he will then pursue Dhamma. But the Mauryan Empire was a centralized empire. It was an empire based on proper bureaucracy. It had internal and external trade. Dhamma is a political religious philosophy which was used by Ashoka to consolidate the empire. Dhamma is not a proper religious philosophy. It is not Buddhism. It is his interpretation of Buddhism itself. And at the same point of time, we will also have the Chera, the Chola and the Pandyas. They are mentioned in even the texts of the inscriptions or the edicts of what we call as the Mauryans, and specifically the Ashokan rock edicts. So the configuration of North India and South India between 324 to 184 BCE is a very big empire in the form of the Mauryans, and the Mauryans along with the Sangam age polities, or Sangam polities as they are called, will coexist and be there. Now, the Maurya, you have to remember 3 to 4 things. First, you need to know the texts which are quite important, because you need to know Megasthenes, Strato, or rather Strabo, Justin, Arrian. You need to know their text, which I call as JAP, which is Megasthenes, Strato, Strabo rather, Justin, Arrian and Pliny. Very, very important. The texts which are from the Greek text. Why are they Greek texts? Because what is going to happen is Alexander's empire is going to actually disintegrate, and with Alexander's empire disintegrating, we will have the Seleucid Empire, which will come here under a person called Seleucus Nicator I. Seleucus Nicator I and Chandragupta Maurya had fought, and thereafter Chandragupta Maurya was married to the daughter of Seleucus Nicator I, which will in turn lead to Helena was married to Chandragupta Maurya, and this sector, which used to be a bone of contention, was given to the Mauryas, and a good relationship was developed between the Greeks, which is the Seleucid Empire, Seleucus Nicator I and Chandragupta Maurya, and that will be true under Bindusara also and Ashoka also. That is why Ashoka also had edicts here which were written in the Khoroshti and the Greek text or the Greek script in that regard. Now, first you need to know the text, then you need to know the rulers, Chandragupta Maurya, thereafter Bindusara, Ashoka, and you can also add one more, which is Brihadarath, who is going to be the last one. These are 4 which you cannot basically ignore. Thereafter, once you have done this, Once you've done this, you would have to go into administrative terminologies. You should remember the main important ones such as Sita Daksha or the Tirthas. You should know basic terminologies. You should know the administration here, and society wise in this period there is nothing new which is happening, just that slavery is becoming, Dasa Dasi tradition which existed in Vedic period itself is becoming more and more crystallized. The concept of untouchability will emerge. The untouchability concept is going to emerge during the Mauryan period itself. So that way it is quite problematic. Untouchability, which is the concept within Shudras itself, will develop during the Mauryan period. Kautilya talks about wage labor, he talks about slave labor. For Megasthenes somehow slavery did not exist, but Megasthenes does not understand it in the concept of how slavery, Dasa Dasi tradition, debt bondage was there in India. So Sangam and Mauryas. The last thing which you need to know about the Mauryas is the Dhamma concept, the edict locations, which we'll try to provide you separately. And other than that, the last ruler is Brihadrath. Brihadrath had become very, very unpopular and there's a lot of resentment. And his commander-in-chief, a Brahmin called Pushyamitra Shunga, is going to kill Brihadrath and in turn establish the post-Mauryan period and the period where we have a lot of flux and the Shunga Empire. Now, the period between 184 and 150 BC, there are three cutoff points or 3 points. We have 184 BCE, then we have 165 BCE, then we have 150 BCE. Here again still Sangam polities remain and they will be resilient and be there also mentioned by these different empires. You have the Shungas under Pushyamitra Shunga and Agnimitra as mentioned by Kalidasa, who will exist. Then you will have the concept of, from Shungas we will go into the Indo-Greeks, and last but not the least is the Shakas. The Shakas 150 BC, sometimes also given 200 BC with regards to that. Now their locations are very important, but I will give you one ruler name where that was very important. Here Pushyamitra Shunga and Agnimitra. Here you have Menander, Strato and Agatha Kotia. Strato was his son and Agatha Kotia the regent of Strato itself, and you have Menander who is considered to have converted to Buddhism. In Sakas you have Chastana, who is the one who started the Saka era also. We have the Vikram era in between also under the concept of Vikramaditya of Ujjain, has nothing to do with the Guptas. Vikramaditya of Ujjain and the Saka Chastana, Vikram era, Saka era, and Chastana Rudradaman being very, very important. Now their location is very interesting. The location is that the Shungas were not able to control the whole of North India and they were only able to take the most important mid sector itself, thereafter which is the Gangetic plain in that regard. The Indo-Greeks will basically come out of the Seleucid Empire. The Seleucid Empire will be destroyed by or taken over by one of its governor, Diodotus I, who is going to then establish what is called the Indo-Greeks. Indo-Greeks also the first to issue and not circulate gold coins and proper coinage. Previously we had punchmark coins in the Mahajanapada period. Proper coinage in India will come under the Indo-Greeks, who will start to give double die struck proper coinage with the name and the image of the ruler also. And something very interesting was happening in the Tibetan plateau and in the Central Asian sector, wherein you have something called the Yuchi tribe who were here. They are no one else but the Kushanas in that regard. And you had the Sakas, also called as the Scythians, or also called the Scythian Parthenons. The Scythian Parthenons, because the Scythians are basically going to be pushed by the Yuchi tribe because the Chinese were expanding at this point of time. While the Chinese will expand over the Yuchi, it will in turn shift the Sakas. They will come like this into the Indian subcontinent because they could not go south straight, with the Pamir not also being there. They will go through the Parthenon area, that is why they called Scytho-Parthenons, and they will establish in India a whole sector here which is called the Saka era or the Saka Empire. And now the Kushanas will be sitting here till 150 BCE. Now you can see that they are basically covering the erstwhile northern sector. Here you still have the Cheras, the Pandyas and the Cholas. And thereafter in this sector there was something brewing up which is going to blossom by 100 BC. This is basically the configuration of North and South India at this point of time, with this area where the Satavahanas are actually now rising out of very small rulers and very small centers of power. So, this brings us to the period of 150 BC to 300 CE. One thing very, very important for this period, remember, is that there is a lot of trade which is happening from different sectors, and be it Southeast Asia, be it China, lot of trade, and the most important, Roman trade had now started to flourish, and the highest point in external trade, which was revived during the 6th century BC itself, will now reach its highest point during this period, with Roman coins entering into the Indian subcontinent. And we know quite a lot of the Augustus Caesar temple in the Chera Empire itself, a whole regiment in the Cheras itself, the Pandyas known as the kingdoms of Pearl. So, we know that Roman trade, Southeast Asian trade. Now, 150 BC to 300 CE, you can see that the transition between BC to CE, which is before Common Era to Common Era, happens between this period, and we have in the 100 BCE phase and then the 30 CE phase, and rather we should keep it here. We should keep it here, which is 100 BCE, and Sangam polities were there, Sangam polities. And 100 BC is the period of the Satavahanas, and 30 CE is the period of the Kushanas. Now, basically both of them will coexist after a point, which is from 30 CE onwards. In north you have the Kushanas, in south you have the Satavahanas, and the Sakas will also persist in that regard. Now, the Kushanas, you should remember, you have to remember Kuja, the one who started, thereafter Kanishka Huvishka. Kanishka Huvishka, very important, culturally related to the Gandhara school of art, and Kanishka, the highest number of gold coins, highest volume of gold coins is Gupta's, which is in tonnage. If you go into gold coins, it is Gupta's. Number, it is Kanishka. Gold coin, now India starts to flourish, culturally also very, very important. Huvishka is brother. Satavahanas have a very interesting peculiarity. They are not matrilineal because they still follow the father's side, but in certain books it says matrilineal. They take their mother's name in honor as a suffix or a prefix. So, they mostly take it as a prefix, which is you have Gautami Putra Satkarni as the most important ruler here. So, Vishishti Putra Pulyami, Gautami Putra Satkarni, the most important. He expanded like anything and took the smaller rulers of the sector, Gangas, small Kadambas, was able to expand in the whole of South India and take the central sector itself. They are very powerful that way, Brahmins, Brahmanical revivalism, and they are also credited to do something which will destroy the Indian empire or the Indian civilization in that sense, which is land grants in lieu of service, and in lieu, basically first given to Brahmins for appeasement, then in lieu of service, which will in turn lead to feudalistic tendencies to rise, because now they were creating power centers in the form of land grants which were tax free. If it is tax free, if it is hereditary, it creates a power center. So, what is the configuration? So, basically the Kushanas are able to expand and take, first having their empire capital in Peshawar, then in Mathura. The Kushanas will be able to expand like this. The Sakas will tuck in here. The Satavahanas are going to rule the whole of the Deccan sector, and you can also see the whatever is left of the Chera Chola Pandyas, but Kushana, Satavahanas and Sakas will become the three major power centers, Kushanas being the most important in north, Satavahanas being the most important in south. But the problem is, by the Satavahana period, late Kushana period, feudalistic tendencies, which is this concept of sub-feudatory and mentality, which is there is one king and under it you have multiple power centers. This is called decentralization of power, which is feudatory mentality, feudatory politics, feudatory tendencies. These centers of power will basically break free as soon as the king becomes weak, which is going to be one of the features even of the Guptas. So, once Kushana, Satavahana, Sakas have properly established themselves, by the period we come to 319, there will be change, and this will lead to the rise of, in 319 BCE and 467 and 550 CE, you have two things which will happen together. Here you will have the Guptas, this will be the highest point of the Guptas, thereafter there will be decline, and you will have the Vakatakas here. Now, under the Guptas, though the Gupta Empire which basically is quite big. That way is quite big, and at one point of time will even extend till the Kanchipuram sector. The Guptas are quite important, but the problem with the Guptas is that they are not a properly centralized empire. They had a core region, and beyond that core region it was all based on suzerainty and overlordship. They accepted Gupta power, but they were not directly under the Guptas. Here the Vakatakas will come here and tuck in inside in the Deccan sector, basically coming out of the Satavahanas itself. The Guptas and the Vakatakas that ways were actually feudatories of the Kushanas and the Satavahanas. So, feudatory mentality becoming important, but the area which I have marked here is the core area, could extend till here maximum, but there is also a lot of areas which were just in the name. So, the Gupta Empire, though the golden age of culture, is not the golden age of political power, because the fragmentation of Indian polity had already started by this point of time. Now, in Guptas again you need to know terminologies, which is first very important. You need to know the texts, Kalidasa text, Vishnu Gupta, Panchtantra. You need to know the inscriptions, Iran inscription, Mehrauli inscription, and the iron pillar of Delhi, which is Chandragupta Vikramaditya, not Chandragupta Maurya, Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. And thereafter from the Guptas you also have to remember that the most important development in society and religion was that Bhagavatism will rise, which is the concept of Dashavatara, and now there will be movement away from Vedic text to the Puranic text, and from Vedic Brahmanism we will have Puranic Hinduism rising, which will in turn lead to the concept of the Dashavatar. The Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva will become very important. The concept of Shakti is going to become very important. And now basically the fight between Buddhism, which had started in 6th century BCE and where Buddhism had been winning, now the Guptas will revive Brahmanical power, which will in turn lead to further caste formation, which had already started in post-Mauryan period, wherein because of the assimilation of the foreigners and the Shakas or the Indo-Greeks, there was what we call as Varna Samskara, which is with assimilation and intermixing, we got more and more sub-categories within the Varnas itself, which is basically caste. If you want to call it, caste and jati is equal at this point of time. I am not talking about caste of today, but of this period, which is the 6th, 4th, 5th century BCE or CE. Now, Bhagavatism will in turn lead to further expansion of Hinduism into the tribal sector with assimilation of tribes. It will in turn further lead to sub what we call as sub-categorization. Varna Samskara will go further, and the Guptas in that regard will be very important for Brahmanical revivalism, but further land grants were being given. Vakatakas, the same story. Here Harisena is a very important ruler who is related to how the Ajanta caves became what they were. Though the Ajanta caves construction started during the Gupta period, the main construction happens under the Vakatakas, and Satavahanas also have a little bit of role, but it is the Guptas who basically are the ones who are actually given the credit of starting the construction itself. By 550 CE, there will be now the Gupta Empire will start to waver. It will start to break, and we will now enter the post-Gupta period, which we also call as the period of early medieval. Early medieval is basically the period between 550 to 1191 CE, 1192, which is basically the Battle of Terrain, first and second. So, finally we finished ancient. I hope ancient is now sorted for you and you understand the basic contours here. Now, when we go into early medieval, see early medieval we have multiple dynasties. I have listed this down for you so that you know their basic what we call as periods, but I will tell you who are important for us in the story. Later Guptas, Maukharis, Maitrakas, Pushyabhutis, Chalukya, Pallava are the ones which I really care about, but all of them are either contemporaries to each other or are fighting for power. And what I will do is now I will shift. Rather than giving you these dates after dates, I have already given that to you. I will show you how India is evolving at this point of time. So, once the Guptas decline, what happens is that the late Gupta emerge in the main area. A question came on this directly. Then you have what are called the Pushyabhutis rising in the Thanesar sector, and you had the Maukharis coming up in between. So you can see Gupta's areas have now been parceled out by its feudatories such as the Pushyabhutis and Maukharis. Here you have the Maitrakas and here you have the Varmans. Thereafter you have the Chalukyas and the Pallavas rising at this point of time. Basically what happens is there are total 7 different polities which emerge out of the Gupta and the Vakataka Empire, which is erstwhile. But there will be further consolidation. The further consolidation is that the Pushyabhutis will be able to establish themselves properly. Pushyabhutis means basically Harshavardhan or the Vardhana dynasty in that regard. Pushyabhuti is basically their first identity. They are able to establish themselves in the main area, but again it is a proper decentralized feudalistic polity with fragmented army, and Harshvardhan did not really have any control over the areas beyond his core area itself. Kannauj becoming very important now. Thereafter we will have the Chalukyas, the Pallavas, the Varmans and the Maitrakas. So the Maitrakas and the Varmans consolidate the east and the west, and thereafter Pushyabhuti, Chalukya, Pallava will now become the major. You know Harshvardhan, Hunsang came, got robbed, and thereafter law and order issues, proper feudalistic polity, the issues of feudalistic mentalities is developing, and he does not have money, so he is giving land grants as a form of salaries. Further, Chalukyas, you would know, Pulkesin II, the most important Battle of Narmada, fights with Harshvardhan, does not allow him to go down. And the Pallavas, very important culturally. You have Mahendravarman I. Mahendravarman is the one who is related to the rock cut phase of the Pallavas itself. Then you have Narsimha Varman I, his name Mamala, after which the Mahabalipuram sector is actually established. And then you have Narsimha Varman II, Raj Simha, who is the one who will basically be the Simha. He is the one who basically starts the Dravida architecture, the structural phase of South India. And that way the Pallavas and the Chalukyas will keep on fighting over a very age old thing, which is the Raichur Doab, who will control the Tungabhadra. And there is a lot of documented wars between Pulkesin, Mahendravarman, thereafter Vikramaditya and Narsimhavarman I, Narsimhavarman II. So we have a lot of context here itself, but this is basically the process of development between the period of 500 to 700. We basically see this configuration from 7 different polities to now 5 major polities in that regard. These 3 should be in your notebook and should be in your hands. Chalukyas, there are 3 Chalukyas, which is Chalukyas of Badami, who was the first one. Then you have Chalukyas of Vengi, you have Chalukyas of Lata also, and therefore you have Eastern Chalukya, Western Chalukya, who are descendants of these Chalukyas itself. So Chalukyas is the original Chalukyas in that sense. Now, after this phase, things will become even more interesting, and now we are moving towards medieval, which is after 700 CE itself. They will in turn give rise to a fragmented polity, and this fragmented polity is going to be very critical to understand why did Ghazni or Gori win so many times, and specifically Ghazni. So here you have again the list of all of them. You have the Rajputs, but for us who are more important is Pratiharas, Palas, Rashtrakutas and Cholas. This is the main Cholas, Imperial Chola, the Raja and Rajendra Chola, and you can see they will go up till 1279, which is even when the Delhi Sultanate has been established. Their time period does not really matter, but their configuration matters, and that is what I am going to show you, how India is evolving till the point we come to Delhi Sultanate, and thereafter the story is much more simpler. So let us look at the 7 or 800 CE India at this point of time. So you have the tripartite struggle, which is quite common, but I will now also talk about Central Asia so that you understand what is happening in Central Asia. Here you have the Abbasid Caliphate. The Abbasid Caliphate is a very big empire, with the Abbasid Caliphate being the political and religious leaders of all Muslims at this point of time. It is now coming till this point, and they have nothing to do with the Indian subcontinent. In the Indian subcontinent, we have poised with the battle for Kannauj with the Pratiharas also called the Gujra Pratiharas, the Palas, the Rashtrakutas and the Cholas. And herein lies the concept, wherein basically they are the three powers fighting for the Kannauj sector. The Pratiharas, the Palas being Buddhist, remember that is the most important peculiarity among them. If you need to remember Rashtrakuta names, remember all Lord Vishnu names, Indra, Krishna are basically Rashtrakutas one, and the Gujra Pratiharas are that way is important because they will control Kannauj first, Bhoja being very, very important in this story. Now, Mihir, Bhoja or Bhoja. Now, this is where India is stable. India is stable. The Abbasid Caliphate does not want to come from this sector itself. The Cholas are very, very powerful and holding, and they have certain control over northern Sri Lanka, and then they will have control or influence even over Java, Sumatra. Now, it is from this point that because Pratihara, Rashtrakutas and Palas are actually feudatories and have feudatory mentality, and because still they will have strong rulers, the feudatories or the Samantas or the Mahabhojas as they are called, they are holding them. Till they are holding them, then the empire is stable. But as soon as the central authority will go away, because they are decentralized empires, it will start to automatically open up. When it will start to automatically open up, it will lead to the rise of the Rajputs. Rajputs were basically inside the sphere of the Palas, Pratiharas and the Rashtrakutas. They basically were feudatories, now became very powerful, and now we go into the phase where between 800 to 900 CE, we will see multiple changes happening. First, the Abbasid Caliphate will go out of picture itself, and you will have the Samanid dynasty coming up here. Samanids, the Turks were rising at this point of time, Islamicized Turks, the Al-Tipin and Al-Tigin being very, very important in that regard. And in the Indian side, everything remains the same. The Pratihara, the Rashtrakutas and the Palas, along with the Cholas being very, very important. They hold ground, but they are becoming weaker in this period. And the Samanid dynasty, which has come out of the Abbasid Caliphate, is now reaching till this point. Again, did not try to cross, did not touch the Indian subcontinent, but Turks are rising. Al-Tigin and Al-Tipin is the first ruler of no one else but the Ghaznavid dynasty, and now this is the most important phase. Between 990 to 998, you will have Alp-Tigin or Alp-Tipin who will basically rise, and in between 998 to 1030, we will have what is called as the Ghaznavid dynasty. And Ghaznavid dynasty, as it is called, because from Ghazni, now Mahmud of Ghazni is going to start to enter India. But India had also changed quite a lot at this point of time, wherein we will have multiple rulers here. We will have the Hindu Shahis. I think this is not very. We will have the Hindu Shahis. We will have the Sultans of Multan. We will have now the Tomars rising. We will have the Chauhans. We will have the Pratiharas still in their core region. We will have the Gahadwalas. We will have the Senas, the Palas, the Chandelas, and even the Solankis rising at this point of time, with the Cholas being there. So, you can see now India has been parceled into multiple actors. We have Hindu Shahis, Sultans of Multan, Tomar, Pratihara, Chauhan, Solanki, Gahadwala, Pala, Sena, Chandela, Chola. If you want to add Paramas, they will come into this also. Now, basically the de facto border becomes the Hindu Shahi rulers, and the Hindu Shahi rulers were the ones who faced the brunt 17 times of Mahmud of Ghazni, and Ghazni is known to have come into India. He had no political ambition, he had economic and religious dimensions for him to come to India, but he was actually interested in expanding in the west rather than going towards the east. He was wanted to go towards the west, that is why he never came. However, whilst all of this is happening, this is the period in which India will be looted multiple times and Ghazni will be keep on coming in. Hindu Shahis basically will disappear because of that, and because Hindu Shahis used to face the main brunt and they all have feudatory mentality, which is not my problem, nobody gave a united response, which is going to be a very important aspect. Thereafter, between 1030 to 117, we will now see the Ghaznavid dynasty breaking up into what is called as the Seljuks. Mahmud of Ghazni is dead. Seljuks did not try to come into India. They are again a type of Turkish dynasty, but Muslim dynasty in that regard. And now in India there will be consolidation, and that consolidation will be that the Chauhans will become the rulers of North India, with Prithviraj Chauhan is going to emerge very, very important. The Gahadwalas are going to take the Gangetic plain, with Jayachandra being a very important ruler. The Senas will take this sector. The Chandelas will take this sector. The Cholas will keep on chilling in the south. They did not care what was happening in North India. Then you will have the Solankis, and in between you will have the Paramars and all, but this is basically the new configuration which has emerged. Now the Chauhans basically become the de facto border, and Hindu Shahis are gone along with the Sultans of Multan. Now it is here that the Seljuks in 117 CE are going to break up. They will break up not into one but into two. One is called the Khwarizmi dynasty, and the other one is called the Gurid or Gori dynasty. And Gurid dynasty is where Muhammad of Gori is going to be there, and Khwarizmi dynasty, because it will, you see, Khwarizmi dynasty is going to be here. It will not allow the Gurids who are ruling from Gor, which is a place, they can't go west. So now Muhammad of Gori had no other option. With territorial ambition, he will now look towards India. This is important. Looking towards India. Ghazni never looked toward India with regards to territorial ambition, but Gurids did. Further, now the Chauhans are going to face the brunt of the Gori invasion itself. You have Senas, you have Solankis, you have Chandelas, you have Cholas, and now Chauhans will now face the Gori, which is Muhammad of Gori. 1191 first battle of Terrain, 1192 second battle of Terrain. Here Prithviraj Chauhan will win against Gori. Gori had underestimated the power of Prithviraj Chauhan. Prithviraj Chauhan will go to Gahadwalas and say, we need a united front. Jayachandra, in a way, in fables has been told that he in a way did not agree, and he betrayed Prithviraj Chauhan. And in 1192, when Gori will come back with mounted archers, the horse stirrup itself, and a better mobilized army, he will defeat Prithviraj Chauhan in the battle, second battle of Terrain. And the first battle of Terrain is here. Here Prithviraj Chauhan will win, here Prithviraj Chauhan will lose. This in turn will lead to us transitioning from early medieval into medieval. Medieval is with the second battle of Terrain and the establishment of Turkish rule in India, which is 1206, which is Delhi Sultanate. Here the timeline is very easy. You have 1206, 1336, 1347, then you can go to 1414, 1450, 1526, and thereafter 1707. This is the last discussion we now have. Now, here 1206 is the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate. Delhi Sultanate basically is between 1206 to 1414. Some people add Sayyids into Delhi Sultanate. Technically they aren't, because Timur's nominee was Sayyids. Lodhis are also called the part of the Delhi Sultanate. That is again sometimes problematic. So in certain books it will say till 1415, certain books it will say till 1526. I go with 1414 because that is the academic understanding of this idea. Sayyids technically not, but if in the examination they say Sayyids are part of Delhi Sultanate, go with it, because the examiner has not read recent research. End of that story. You have Delhi Sultanate here. Delhi Sultanate, you already know, you should know the following rulers. Under the Mamluks, who were also called the slave dynasty, you have Kutubuddin Aibak, Iltutmish, Razia, Balban. Kutubuddin Aibak established the empire, removed Indian subcontinent from Central Asian politics with his politics with regards to Yaldus. Thereafter, we have the concept of Iltutmish. Iltutmish, Tanka and Jittal, the two coins which were introduced, silver coin and the copper coin, Tanka and Jittal, was introduced by Iltutmish. Iltutmish also introduced the Chahalgani system, which will weaken the power of the Sultanate, which is the Dal Chalisa, the concept of 40 ministers which are basically surrounding the Sultan itself. Then Razia will face the brunt. Iqta was also started by Iltutmish, a very important concept of paying officers through land grants which are iktas, but non-hereditary so that it becomes better in the larger context. It had lot of safeguards, checks and balances, non-hereditary, transferable and non-permanent. Ikta, then Razia will lose out to the Chahalgani, she will be killed, and Balban is going to then take back the empire itself vis-a-vis the policy of blood and iron, the concept of purity itself, and he will establish the empire properly, revive the power. Sijda, Paibos, he used to argue that he is Zilallah, which is the shadow of God itself, and considered very, very important in consolidating the empire. Thereafter, from Mamluks, we see a transition into Khiljis, where Khiljis are the ones who are going to change the configuration. Mamluks were both pure Turks, Khiljis are not pure Turks, Turk plus Afghan, and under Khiljis we have Jalaluddin Khilji, Alauddin Khilji known for his market reforms. The idea of he needed a big army for the Mongols, he will basically control production, the Banjaras, and have 3 different mandis, Shanai Mandi appointed with Bariz itself. Jalaluddin Khilji known to have removed one of the Mongols invasion in 1292, a better person than Alauddin, that was the what we call as the most ruthless ruler, but also politically very, very stable in that regard. Market reforms is what he is known for. Then will come the Tughlaqs. Tughlaqs, you know about the Tughlaqs also, which is basically you have Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq is, they are even interesting origin, Jat plus Turk in that regard. Mother was Jat and the father was Turk in that regard. You will have Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq known to have had a conflict with Nizamuddin Aulia, the curse of Nizamuddin Aulia itself, that he entered Tughlaqabad fort and died. Muhammad bin Tughlaq known for the 4 experiments. Token currency, the concept of silver shortage indeed lead with token currency. Shift of capital first, which is first the shift of capital from Delhi to Daulatabad. Second is token currency. Thereafter you have the Karachil and the Khurasan expedition, where he will lose the armies and basically lose out a lot of money. Firoz Shah Tughlaq made Ikta hereditary and the process of decline started from there itself. Then in between the Delhi Sultanate itself, we have 2 very big empires emerging. In 1336 we have the Vijayanagara Empire. And in 1347 we have nothing else but the Bahmanis. The Bahmani rulers and the Vijayanagara rulers will have a very interesting configuration. You will have Delhi Sultanate here, and till this point you will then have the Bahmanis, and here you will have the Vijayanagara Empire. A lot of people think that Vijayanagara, Bahmani are later or at the same point of time. They are 1206 to 1414. They are emerging in 1347, they are in 1336. And we know that within Vijayanagara rule, we should know about Krishnadeva Raya. Here you should know the concept of Sangama, Sulva, Tulva, Arividu. Sangama, you have such as Harihara, Bukka, Devraya 1, Devraya 2. The Sulvas, we have Imadi Narsimha. Tulvas, no one else but Krishnadeva Raya itself. Arividu, later rulers in that regard. Here we have Bahmani. Bahmani, that was quite important because of Firoz Shah Bahmani and Mahmud Gawan, culturally very, very important. You have Hasan Gangu, who is going to establish the empire. In the Vijayanagara rule, whilst we had Ikta here, you have Nayankara here, which is again a feudalistic tendency based decentralized system of control, because the Nayaks were more or less autonomous in that sense. And in 1414, after the invasion of Timur, who will 1398 itself, 1398 Timur will come, ransack Delhi, and thereafter Mongols had already become a problem. Timur is technically not a Mongol, he is a Turco-Mongol, and then he will appoint his own nominee, and that was Kriz Khan. Kriz Khan will basically be a Sayyid ruler. Then you have Mubarak Khan, then you have Muhammad Khan, and then you have Alauddin Shah. These are the 4 rulers which are known to us. Alauddin Shah had a very, very powerful general, his name was Bahlul Lodi, which will in turn lead to the Lodis rising, when Bahlul is going to say that give me the power itself. Khiz Khan, Mubarak Shah and Muhammad Shah, and they all were very, very weak rulers that way. Sayyids, no real contribution in that regard. Lodis, we have Bahlul, Sikandar, and thereafter Ibrahim. Ibrahim Lodi is the one who is going to now fight Babur. But the problem was Behlul was very egalitarian. Sikandar and Ibrahim, the power had gone to their head. Sikandar is also the one who will shift the capital away from Delhi to Agra, which will only be brought back by Shah Jahan in that regard. Ibrahim Lodi had one very, very jealous and very, very problematic governor. His name Daulat Khan Lodi. And Daulat Khan Lodi, thereafter, what India looked at this point of time was, you had the Lodis here, core area here, and thereafter in this sector we had Rana Sangha, and from here in Kabul we will have Babur sitting. Babur himself, a son of Timur, the grandson of Timur in that regard, great grandson of Timur. Because of the rise of the Ottomans, the Safavids and the Uzbeks creating pressure, one of the Samarkand rulers, Fargana rulers, were now sitting in Kabul, and Daulat Khan Lodi, who was controlling this sector, the Punjab sector, is going to invite Babur to come to India so as to fight Ibrahim Lodi in that regard. That will lead to the first battle of Panipat, and Rana Sangha will first support but then take back the support, which will in turn lead to then Babur going against Rana Sangha. Then he further moves against Medini Rai, and then towards the battle of Ghaggar. So 1526 is basically the establishment of the Mughal Empire. Mughal Empire, you have multiple battles which you should know here. Panipat being the first one, first battle of Panipat. People ask why Panipat? Because it's a fulcrum coming from the Shivalik and the Aravali range. It's a fulcrum which we can enter in that regard. So first battle of Panipat, then you have Khanwa, where basically Rana Sangha will be defeated by Ibrahim Lodi, Babur. Thereafter you will have the battle of Chanderi, where Medni Rai and the Rajput Confederacy will be defeated by Babur in that regard. And then you have the battle of the Ghaggar River, Ghaggar River. Ghaggar River is basically going to be the point where the Afghans are going to lose, and basically from there Sher-Shah Suri will also rise, and we have Babur, whose main role was to expand in the initial sector in North India. Panipat, Khanwa, Chanderi, Ghaggar, this is a G. And thereafter you will have Humayun, who will come to power, but Humayun was too into drinking and opium. Along with that, he loved books, but was not very what we call as politically oriented in that regard. So the problem with Humayun is that he did not understand the onslaught of Sher-Shah Suri, who was rising as one of the last Afghans, Lodi in that regard, and he will then fight the battle of Chausa, where Humayun will be first defeated, did not do anything. Then you have the battle of Kannauj, where Humayun will be properly defeated, and that in turn will lead to him to go to the Safavid Empire. Sher-Shah Suri's empire is going to be there, interganam phase, and then his son is going to lose to Humayun in the battle of Sarhind. By 1555, what we call as the rule of the Mughals is back, and in 1556, Humayun is going to fall from the library and break his neck, in turn leading to Akbar to come to power. And from 1556 we have Akbar. You have to remember Mansabdari system, bureaucratic system like Ikta, but more well defined, Jat and Savar rank. Rajput policy, where he showed them the power first, then tried to assimilate them under his suzerainty with giving them Watan Jagirs and matrimonial alliances. Then further you have to go into the idea of his religious policy, which is Sulekul, Tawhid-e-Ilahi, Deen-e-Ilahi, Mazhar, infallible decree itself, wherein he now started to break the back of the ulemas and took away jizya and conversion of POWs into Islam. And further, Akbar is known to be the one who created a consolidated big empire. After Akbar comes Jahangir, little bit of conflict in coming to power. Jahangir had a problem with his own son Khusro, which will in turn lead to a small battle of succession, very common in Mughals, father and son fighting. And thereafter Jahangir will further consolidate, change the Mansabdari system with the concept of Ekaspa, Duaspa, Shiaspa. Savar rank further opened up. Jahangir, stable, known for paintings itself. Then will come Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan fought with Jahangir properly because of Noor Jahan. Noor Jahan wanted her son-in-law Shahryar to basically become the next emperor, and Khurram, which is Shah Jahan, did not want to do that. He was asked to go to Kandahar. He will rebel, and thereafter finally Jahangir will realize that Shah Jahan is good administrator. They will reconcile. Shah Jahan will come to power. Shah Jahan, marble guy, we already know. Taj Mahal, shifts the capital back to Delhi. Red Fort, Jama Masjid. Over and above that, Shah Jahan is also one who will start to overspend, and when he will start to overspend, his sons are now going to fight for power. Murad, Dara Shikoh and Aurangzeb will now become the problem, and herein with Shah Shuja you know because of the Farman itself, we will be discussing that tomorrow. Shah Shuja, Murad and Dara Shikoh, the most important contender, the eldest of them, and Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb and Murad will go together, and Shah Shuja and Dara Shikoh will go together, and this will in turn will lead to the death of Dara Shikoh and Shah Shuja, and later Murad will be killed by Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb will come to power. Aurangzeb known for his bigoted policies itself, and therefore his bigoted policies, his way of controlling the fiscal crisis will in turn lead to agrarian revolt when he will increase taxes, when he will reduce the number of Jagirs, that will in turn lead to the Jagirdari crisis, and that in turn will end, this cycle will end with his death and the end of the medieval period, which is death of Aurangzeb 1707. Now, we have discussed a very long phase from 2 million BCE to 1707, ancient, early medieval and medieval. I hope that this has helped you consolidate your ideas. I have tried to get a certain timeline so that you understand it as a story. I have also given you certain maps. This PPT will be uploaded to the Telegram channel. Use it. Tomorrow I will see you with modern India, where we will start from 1707 and go until 1947. So, thank you so much. I hope this session has been useful. Final lap is for your good, and I hope you will use these sessions to revise. This is not a teaching session. Please do understand, I am trying to consolidate for you what was happening in the Indian subcontinent throughout this period itself, and that way it is important. Thank you. Take care. See you tomorrow with Modern India. Bye-bye.